The screams started before the sun fully crested the Zagros Mountains, a jagged, crimson-tinged dawn bleeding across the ancient sky. It was 522 years before the birth of the Nazarene, and Susa, jewel of the Achaemenid Empire, was already a cauldron of anticipation, a simmering dread seasoned with morbid curiosity. Not for a military parade, nor a religious procession, were the citizens roused at such an ungodly hour. No, this was to be a spectacle of a far more chilling nature, a raw demonstration of imperial justice so visceral, so unprecedented, it would forever be etched into the annals of Persian history, whispered in hushed tones across palace courtyards and bustling marketplaces alike. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the unspoken terror, the stifled breaths of 1,000 souls gathered within the palace walls, their eyes wide with a mixture of revulsion and morbid fascination. A collective gasp rippled through the throng as he was brought forth. Cambyses, royal judge of Persia, a man once revered, his pronouncements law, his integrity beyond reproach, or so it had seemed. Now, shackled and stripped of his regal robes, he was but a shadow of his former self, his face gaunt, his eyes haunted by the specter of his impending doom. The tremors that racked his aging frame were not merely those of fear. They were the physical manifestations of a life unraveling, of a legacy crumbling into dust. For years, Cambyses had sat in judgment, dispensing justice with an iron hand, his pronouncements echoing with the authority of the great king himself. He had been a bulwark against chaos, a beacon of integrity in a world rife with intrigue and corruption. Yet, like a magnificent edifice undermined by termites, his moral foundations had been silently eroded by the insidious lure of greed. He had succumbed to the oldest temptation of power, selling his judgment for a fistful of gold, betraying the very principles he was sworn to uphold. The specifics of his transgression were almost banal in their simplicity. A territorial dispute between two petty nobles, a squabble over a vineyard, and a contested water source. One nobleman, knowing his claim was weak, had offered Cambyses a bribe, a sum so exorbitant, so blindingly tempting, that the judge had, with agonizing deliberation, chosen to abandon his oath, to cast aside his honor, to condemn an innocent man for personal gain. It was a decision that would not only seal his own fate, but would also forever stain the legacy of his family. Little did Cambyses know, as he accepted the tainted gold, that his every move was being scrutinized, his every word recorded. The wronged nobleman, incensed by the blatant injustice, had dispatched a loyal scribe, a man of unwavering integrity, to gather irrefutable proof of the judge's perfidy. This scribe, a humble but relentless seeker of truth, had meticulously documented the illicit transaction, every secret meeting, every whispered promise, every glint of gold exchanged under the cloak of darkness. Armed with this damning evidence, the scribe had risked his own life to deliver it directly to Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great, the king of kings, the ruler of the Achaemenid Empire. Cambyses, fresh from his victorious campaign in Egypt, was not a man known for his leniency. He was a warrior king, a visionary leader, but also a ruthless enforcer of justice, a man who believed in swift and decisive action. He saw Cambyses' corruption not merely a personal failing, but as a systemic threat, a cancer that could metastasize and devour the very fabric of his empire. The trial was a mere formality, a theatrical performance designed to underscore the gravity of the crime and the severity of the punishment. Cambyses himself presided, his gaze piercing, his voice resonant with the authority of a god. The evidence was presented, irrefutable and damning. The witnesses testified, their voices trembling with fear and awe, and Cambyses, confronted with the inescapable truth, had no choice but to confess his guilt, to acknowledge his betrayal, to accept the inevitable consequences of his actions. But the confession did not appease Cambyses. It only fueled his fury. He saw Chrysamnis as a symbol of a deeper rot, a manifestation of the moral decay that threatened to undermine the foundations of his empire. He resolved to make an example of him, a spectacle so gruesome, so unforgettable, that it would serve as a potent deterrent to any other judge, any other official who might be tempted to follow in his corrupt footsteps. The sentence was delivered with chilling precision: death by flaying, a punishment reserved for the most heinous of crimes, a barbaric ritual designed to inflict maximum pain and suffering. But Cambyses was not content with simply ending Chrysamnis' life. He sought to transform his death into a symbol, a permanent reminder of the consequences of corruption. Thus, he decreed that the judge's skin, once it had been meticulously removed from his living body, would be tanned and stretched and used to uphold the very chair upon which he sat in judgment, the very seat of justice itself. And then came the final, agonizing twist, the cruelest refinement of Cambyses' twisted justice. Chrysamnis' successor would be none other than his own son. The weight of this decision, the sheer magnitude of its cruelty, was almost unbearable. It was a sentence that would forever haunt the son, forever bind him to the sins of his father, forever remind him of the price of corruption. The atmosphere in the palace courtyard was thick with dread, a palpable sense of impending doom that settled over the assembled crowd like a shroud. The air was heavy with the scent of burning frankincense and the metallic tang of blood, a grim prelude to the horror that was about to unfold. Executioners, their faces masked, their eyes cold and impassive, stood ready with their instruments of torture: knives honed to razor sharpness, tongs designed to grip the flesh, and braziers filled with glowing embers, used to cauterize the wounds. Chrysamnis was led to a raised platform, his steps faltering, his body racked with sobs. He was stripped bare, his aging flesh exposed to the harsh light of the rising sun, a stark symbol of his utter vulnerability. He was bound to a wooden table, his limbs stretched taut, his body a canvas upon which the executioners would paint their macabre masterpiece. The flaying began with excruciating precision. The executioners, masters of their gruesome craft, made careful incisions along Chrysamnis' back, chest, and limbs, separating the skin from the underlying muscle with slow, deliberate strokes. Hot water was poured over the flesh to soften it, to ease the separation, to prolong the torture. As the skin was peeled away, inch by agonizing inch, Chrysamnis' screams pierced the morning air, a symphony of pain that echoed through the palace halls and reverberated through the hearts of all who heard it. Some in the crowd fainted, unable to bear the sight. Others turned away, their faces pale with revulsion. But Cambyses remained impassive, his gaze unwavering, his eyes fixed on the unfolding spectacle, ensuring that the message was etched into the minds of all present. In Persia, justice would be incorruptible, or the price would be unbearable. The flaying continued for hours, the executioners working with methodical precision, their movements devoid of any hint of emotion. They were not sadists, not reveling in the suffering they inflicted. They were simply instruments of the king's will, carrying out their duty with cold, detached efficiency. Death, when it finally came, was not a merciful release. It was the slow, agonizing result of shock, blood loss, dehydration, and the body's inability to regulate its temperature without its protective layer of skin. Chrysamnis remained conscious throughout much of the ordeal, his suffering amplified by the knowledge that his own skin would soon be transformed into a symbol of his shame, a permanent reminder of his betrayal. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the palace courtyard, Chrysamnis' body finally succumbed to the ravages of torture. His screams ceased, his limbs went limp, and his eyes glazed over with the emptiness of death. The executioners, their task completed, carefully removed the last strips of skin, laying them out on the platform, a gruesome tapestry of human suffering. The skin was then treated with salt and other preserving agents, transforming it into a form of leather, a grotesque parody of animal hide. It was then stretched and fitted over the wooden frame of the judicial chair, every stitch, every seam, a testament to Sesamnus's corruption, a permanent reminder of the price of betrayal. The Crimson Edict of Susa had been delivered. Justice, in its most brutal and unforgiving form, had been served. But the story of Sesamnus was far from over. It would live on, whispered in hushed tones, immortalized in art and literature, a chilling reminder of the eternal struggle between justice and corruption, between honor and greed. The spectacle concluded, leaving behind a pall of dread that clung to the very stones of Susa. Yet, the story had only just begun its insidious crawl through the annals of history. The skin, meticulously tanned and stretched, now draped the judicial chair, a ghastly tapestry woven from pain and betrayal. Its surface, once smooth and supple, bore the faint tracery of veins, a subtle roadmap of suffering etched into the very fabric of judgment. The air around it thrummed with an almost palpable energy, a silent scream trapped within the fibers of its macabre upholstery. Cambyses summoned Otanus, Sesamnus's son, a young man thrust into the unenviable position of inheriting his father's office and, more horrifically, his legacy. The Persian tradition held that positions of authority often passed from father to son, a practice Cambyses saw no reason to disrupt, but he infused it with a chilling twist, a potent symbol of accountability. Otanus, likely groomed from a young age for a life of law and governance, now faced a future irrevocably tainted by his father's transgression. The king, his gaze unwavering, his voice devoid of warmth, uttered a single, chilling instruction to Otanus. Always remember upon what leather you sit when you pass judgment. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, a constant, visceral reminder of the consequences of corruption, a perpetual penance etched into the very core of Otanus's being. One can only imagine the turmoil that raged within Otanus's heart in that moment. Was it shame that burned within him, a searing humiliation at his father's betrayal? Was it fear, a crippling terror of repeating his father's mistakes, of succumbing to the same temptations that had led to such a gruesome end? Or was it a simmering resentment, a bitter anger at the king who had so cruelly condemned his father and forever scarred his own future? History offers no definitive answer, no intimate glimpse into the soul of Otanus. It merely records that he assumed his father's role as royal judge, presiding over countless cases, dispensing justice with unwavering integrity. Whether driven by a genuine desire to uphold the law, by the constant chilling reminder beneath him, or by a complex mixture of both, Otanus never repeated his father's transgression. He served with distinction, earning the respect of his peers and the trust of the great king. Later, he would even rise to become a satrap, a provincial governor in Ionia, a testament to his competence and loyalty. But the shadow of Sesamnus's chair loomed large over his entire life, a constant, inescapable presence that shaped his decisions, colored his perceptions, and defined his legacy. Every judgment he rendered, every verdict he pronounced, was filtered through the prism of his father's fate, a perpetual reminder of the price of corruption. The story of Sesamnus did not end with his death, nor with Otanus's ascension to the judicial chair. It resonated through the centuries, a chilling parable of justice and corruption, a potent reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil. The echoes of that crimson dawn in Susa reverberated across continents and through countless generations, finding new life in art, literature, and even political discourse. Nearly 2 millennia later, during the Renaissance, the tale of Sesamnus experienced a powerful resurgence, captivating artists and intellectuals alike. The stark moral clarity of the story, the raw emotional impact of the execution, and the potent symbolism of the skin-covered chair resonated deeply with the Renaissance spirit, which sought to explore the complexities of human nature and the enduring power of moral principles. One of the most enduring artistic interpretations of the story came in 1498, when the Flemish painter Gerard David completed The Judgment of Cambyses, a diptych commissioned by the aldermen of Bruges to hang in the town hall. This masterful work of art, intended to serve as a daily reminder to local magistrates of their sacred duty, depicted the story of Sesamnes with unflinching realism and powerful emotional intensity. The first panel of the diptych portrays the arrest of Sesamnes, capturing the moment of his downfall, the shattering of his reputation, the beginning of his agonizing journey towards his inevitable doom. The second panel depicts the flaying itself, rendered with a gruesome detail that is both horrifying and compelling. In the corner of this second panel, almost hidden from view, sits Otanis on the skin-covered chair, a subtle but profoundly symbolic detail that transforms the entire scene into a potent warning. The choice of subject matter was not arbitrary. In Renaissance thought, public spaces where justice was administered were often adorned with stories that reminded officials of their responsibilities, of the importance of upholding the law, of the devastating consequences of corruption. The story of Sesamnes, with its stark moral clarity and its visceral depiction of punishment, became one of the most enduring and impactful of these allegorical narratives. The image of Sesamnes's flaying and the subsequent use of his skin to upholster the judicial chair was replicated and reinterpreted countless times across Europe, appearing in paintings, engravings, sculptures, and even tapestries. In 1671, the artist William Isaacs van Swanenburg created an elaborate engraving based on a drawing by Joachim van Sandrart, depicting Cambyses ordering the flaying while Otanis sits on the chair, a chilling juxtaposition of power and accountability. These artistic renderings were not created simply to shock or titillate. They were intended to serve as moral instruments, designed to remind anyone who sat in judgment that the law was not theirs to manipulate, that justice was not a commodity to be bought and sold. They were a constant, visual reminder of the price of correction, a warning etched in blood and leather. Even in the modern era, the story of Sesamnes continues to resonate, its message of justice and accountability as relevant today as it was millennia ago. In 2012, during protests in Moscow against perceived judicial corruption, demonstrators carried reproductions of Gerard David's Judgment of Cambyses to the courthouse, a direct and unmistakable statement about the need for integrity in the legal system. The painting's presence in that setting spoke volumes, its image of a judge being flayed alive for betraying his duty serving as a powerful critique of corruption and a demand for justice. The enduring power of the story of Sesamnes lies in its simplicity. It is a tale of temptation and betrayal, of justice and revenge, of the enduring consequences of corruption. It reminds us that those who wield power must be held to the highest standard, and that the price of betrayal must be severe enough to deter even the most powerful from succumbing to temptation. Today, no modern judge sits on a chair upholstered with human skin. Our punishments are far less brutal, our systems far more complex, but the principle remains. Those entrusted with judgment must be held to the highest standard, and the consequences of betrayal must be severe enough to deter it. The memory of Sesamnes' chair serves as a potent metaphor, a chilling reminder that when justice is compromised, society itself is wounded. It is a symbol of accountability, a testament to the enduring power of moral principles, and a warning to all those who would abuse their power for personal gain. In Bruges, Belgium, the Groningen Museum still houses Gerard David's Judgment of Cambyses. The panels, with their meticulous brushwork and graphic detail, remain as unsettling today as they were 5 centuries ago. Visitors often linger before them, drawn in by the vibrant Renaissance colors, only to be confronted by the horror of the scene. Discomfort turns to reflection. The story forces each viewer to ask themselves, if I were entrusted with power, would I resist corruption? And if I did not, what would I deserve? Sesamnes, the judge who was flayed alive, whose skin became the seat of his successor, offers more than a glimpse into the brutal justice of antiquity. He offers a mirror, one that reflects our own age and our own standards. His fate whispers across the centuries, reminding us that the trust placed in those who judge is both a privilege and a burden, and that betraying that trust in any age carries a price that may be far more terrible than we can imagine. The legacy of leather and law endures, a stark reminder to all.